It has been 2 years since Tempest Shadow had moved to Ponyville after she completed her journey to travel to different kingdoms telling them about Storm King to being defeated. After she had completed her journey, she decided to accept Twilight's offer to move to Ponyville and stay at her castle. Even though Twilight even offered Tempest a position at the School of Friendship as a gym teacher, and she accepted that offer as well. Even though she did have a second teaching at the School of Friendship, she was teaching self-defense, just in case if something would happen, if some ponies were end up in a trouble with some other anything. And even when her first classes of self-defense was actually quite a success. A lot of students actually, even some were inexperienced of any sort of self-defense, but eventually a lot of students actually loved her teachings. And she was grateful to being able to share her skills to others in order to protect themselves against anything in danger moment. But despite having this teaching job at the School of Friendship, Tempest were actually feeling like quite lonely after even since she moved to Poland. Even though she had a lot of friends, but she still felt lonely. And even though some of her friends like Rarity and Applejack did have noticed how much she felt lonely, and they asked her often if she had to consider to be maybe try to date some point. Even though when Tempest admitted she never had been a dating before, or even been has never been in a relationship at all. That didn't surprise both Applejack and Rarity though, because ever since she had left her hometown at such a young age and joined forces with Storm King and had been his second in command for some time, would explain why that she didn't have any time for dating, or even thought that was even that she wanted to do. But now that she was free to live her own life, she had even considered being dating, but right now she wasn't really sure if there was any point in town she would even consider being dating. But after a while, she thought about this idea, and one afternoon when she was spending time with Rarity, they were just having at the cafe, just having some snacks together, when Rarity just brought it to mention about dating. She and Spike have been dating for about almost a year at this point. And Rarity did mention that she heard this speed dating service that's open up location in Pune. And Tempest asked, what is a speed dating for? Or this was something that she never heard of. Rarity explained that speed dating is some sort of speed dating place where you will be matched with some mares or stallions, and that you will have a short time of conversation to see or any match between them. And she explains this has actually been quite popular in such big cities like Manhattan, Canterlot, and Trottingham. And now this had opened a location in Pullman. And even though when Rarity said that she never, before she even had started, she said that she probably would have considered tried speed dating if she wasn't with a Westport Spike. And she suggested this to Tempest, maybe try this out. So she thought about it for a moment and said, well, I will think about it. And after all, right now she wasn't in a rush to find a boyfriend or girlfriend as most ponies had find. But she did enjoy her life as herself. She had her friends, she has a teaching job, she has Gruber. But it was even though the missing part of her life to be finding some pony to be with. But after a while though, she decided maybe give it a try, at least. To just check it out to see if it was something that was worth a try at least. So she went there after about a week later, on a Friday. She signed up and she waited to see when it was about to start. She did notice there were a lot of mares and stallions in this location, and she realized These are, in fact, many stallions and mares that he's been looking for, especially some pony to be with, or at least potential partner, for at least. So when it started, she would match with a couple of stallions, but at first she didn't sense any sort of connection or anything that someone, or at least some sort of connection or common interest. But nearly at the end, she was actually matched with a stallion. And this seems to be having a few things in common, like they say type of food, music, and even like to hike in nature sometimes. And even after that, she asked him if he would like maybe to go somewhere, maybe grab something to eat, just to get to know each other even better. And he agreed. So they went to Sugar Cube Corner to have something to eat. There, they start talking more and they get to know each other a little bit better. He get to know that she were the former second in command of Storm King. She believed maybe that would scare him off and that she used to serve a former villain, and that he would not want to have anything to do with her after all. But hearing that, and hearing that she had been traveling before she went back to Poonville to telling the other kingdoms that Storm King was defeated and would never return, and that she herself had embraced friendship, and he did believe in second chances. So after the first, this wasn't considered a date to the both of them though. But then he asked her if she wanted to go out, and she said yes. And even though they decided to go for a picnic, but probably a few on the next day. And the next day, though, they did. They went to the meadows, having a great picnic time together. They small talked, enjoyed this on the picnic they had with them. It's perfect weather. But was still something about this stallion that she couldn't put it, though. He was quite handsome, generous, and he was really kind and sweet. And even though they weren't considered as a couple, but after about maybe 5 dates, they became as an official couple. Even Tempest's friends like Twilight, Applejack, Rarity, they were all happy for her that she may have found her potential future husband, or at least something like that. At least there's on the words of Rarity said that he is quite a catch. He's a really handsome stallion, and if there's something that may click, he may end up getting married with you one day. Even though Tempest just rolled her eyes and said, maybe, but we just start dating and we don't know if this is gonna work or not. And in fact, she was, even though that Rarity herself wished that they could last for a little longer, but Tempest was right. Because they want to rush into such things too much. Even though they just talk about any potential marriage in the future, oh, well, at least if she Tempest actually had asked her boyfriend if he would one day even would consider get married, start a family, and in fact he said that he was considered one day, but he would want to see if this relationship could be long lasting, because he didn't want to rush into it, and she agreed. So for the next several months, they were actually on several dates. They hang out a lot more, and it was getting serious. So, but eventually, all that came to an abrupt end because one day, after being dating for about 4 months, Tempest was meeting her boyfriend at the park. They were just planning to hang out at the park for some time, but when she got there, he was already there waiting for her. She wasn't expecting that he would be there after her, but she was at least happy to see him. But there was something on his look though, because when he saw her, he didn't smile. That's unusual, she thought herself. He always smiles when she sees her. But nevertheless, she walked up to him and asked if something was wrong. He didn't speak at first, but when he said that he has something to tell her, He told her that he had been offered a position as a carpenter in Trondheim. She was actually very happy for him. After all, he was a skilled carpenter in Ponyville and being offered to a position in Trondheim. But she asked him what kind of position. He said that he had just been offered to be a manager of a big carpenter company in Trondheim. And she was really amazed. This was something that he really wished to do. But then he said, there's a catch. Oh? And explained that he had to move to Trondheim in order to work there. Oh, have you accepted the offer? He nodded and then, but he said it doesn't even mean the end of their relationship. He said they could still try just in a long distance, and he will always come back to Ponyville as often he could. And that made her smile. So, right shortly afterwards, he moved. But they still met each other and went as often as they could. She often went to Trottingham, and they spent a lot of time. Their relationship is still stable, strong, but eventually something would happen. And after being dating for another 3 months of this, being a long distance, her boyfriend decided maybe it wasn't worth this long distance anymore. That he started to feel less in love with her. And even though that she tried to explain or maybe tried to ask him was possible that they could at least keep trying, she said that she could maybe move to Trottingham with him, and in that way they would be able to stay each other. Even though he thought it was a good idea, but at the same time he was worried about her job, and and she wasn't, and he wasn't sure if she would find a good job in Trottingham though. After all, that big city didn't often offer so as many good positions at her condition, or well, at least her state. Not being able to perform in magic, but she said she can handle things as good as any regular pony. So both agreed to move and live together in Trondheim. And when Tempest told Twilight, and she said this is going to be a temporarily relief time from the teaching at the School of Friendship, and that she's going to stay with her boyfriend in Trondheim for about maybe a month or two to see if it's going to work. Twilight was a little bit sad to hear that, but she agreed. So shortly after that, she moved to Trondheim, and for the next couple of weeks afterwards, seems to be working. Tempest got a job in as a small grocery store not that far from her boyfriend's apartment, and it seems to be working. After about 2 months, she was actually very happy to see their relationship had been really strong until when she came back home after her job, finding him on the couch just sitting. He looked sad again, and she wondered, has something happened at his work or has he lost a job or anything? She asked that, but he said no. I'm still my job is still still happy to going, but there is something I have to tell you. And he said the same thing. He was no longer in love with her, and she was devastated. She asked him what made him to believe that, and he explained that even despite them living together, being very happy together for the past few months or past few weeks, there has been a lot of thoughts in his mind if this maybe is gonna work and eventually. So he decided maybe it wasn't worth it. So he decided to break up with her. But he let her stay there for the rest of the week before he had to let her to move out. And she was devastated. She wrote back to Twilight immediately, telling her that she will be back by the end of the week. And even though that despite she did like her work at the grocery store, she had made tons of friends there, but she informed her that she is moving back to Ponyville after she and her boyfriend had broken up. But she was offered the position as manager or at least assistant manager, but she had to decline. So she moved back to Ponyville after by the end of the week. Now she was even more devastated. For a while, for a while, she was really happy. She felt like she had perhaps found her true soulmate, but eventually she was wrong. Even when she came back to Pune, her friends saw that she was so devastated, she barely left her at her room at the castle. The only times when she did was just when she went out for small walks or when she went to school to teach. That was the only time she even went out. Other than that, after when she went back to school and after her shift was over, she went back to the castle, went to her room, and locked the door and didn't even leave. Twilight and Spike, for most, was getting more concerned about it. Even Gruber, even Gruber himself had been told, and he was trying to cheering her up as much as they could. But despite all their efforts, was pointless. It wasn't until one day when Spike received a message from a friend from Dragonlance, but a dragon by the name Moonshadow Flash. Moonshadow Flash and Spike have been close friends, and he was even a friend of Amber, and it was Amber who had introduced him to Spike, and they had been pen pals for some time. And eventually, Spike had actually asked him if he wanted to come over to see how he lives in Ponyville. Since Moonshadow Flash had never been much outside Dragonlance for at least in the part of Equestria where Spike lives. And after hearing so much stories about from Amber and from Spike, Moonshadow decided to even to go because he was really curious and eager to know more about Spike's adopted family, like Twilight, as he saw as a big sister, and even to meet Spike's girlfriend, Rarity. How much Rarity was so beautiful, and such kind, generous, and sweet pony. And when Moonshadow's Flash came to Ponyville, he really liked this place, and he agreed. Rarity was really this how as Spike described her, and he was really happy to meet Spike's adopted big sister, Twilight. Even though that he was really curious to know more about the pony lifestyle and like that, and he decided to stay in Ponyville for a little bit some time to get to know some of Spike's friends and even to embrace the friendship and the pony culture to experience himself. And Spike was really happy about that. But just about only one day after when Moonshadow Flash stayed in Ponyville, or at least when he came there, he ran into Tempest in the library. He was surprised there was another unicorn living in the castle. After all, since he came there only about a day earlier, he didn't even notice. Or Twilight didn't even mention there was another pony living in the castle. And he asked her if she was somehow related to Twilight, but Tempest shook her head and said no, she's a friend of hers. And they start talking and seems that they're getting well along. And eventually, something would happen between them, but that wouldn't happen for a long time onwards. For during his time staying in Ponyville, Moonshadow and Tempest started hanging out more and more often in time. Around when they were walking around town, or went to the Sugar Corner, or Sweet Apple Acres, just their friendship was actually getting strong. And she knows that he's the only child, and that he's a good friend, a personal good friend to Amber. And even though, even for most of other places that Tempest had been traveling to, and there's some other places that Moonshadow has only been to, like mostly Dragonlance. Their friendship was unusual, even though despite like Twilight and Spike. But this was something that would spark something more. Because a few months later, when the winter had arrived to Ponyville, Moonshadow Flash was invited by Spike and Twilight to spend his first heartwarming eve with them in Ponyville, and he accepted that invitation. And he had only been told about some of the basic story, how this particular holiday happened, and what's taking place around it, or how to celebrate it. And he was actually very curious to know more about it. So when he came to Ponyville about maybe a week earlier, just in case, and his friendship with Tempest had only grown stronger. But there was something about her that he couldn't even put it though, because he liked her company. There was something about her that sparked a very strong friendship. But over the course of a few months after his first visit to Ponyville, he started thinking about her a lot more often, and he actually started to like her even a bit more as a friend. And during one day before just the heartwarming eve, Tempest and Moonshadow Flash was out for a walk in the snow when he did ask her if she maybe want to go out with her. Go with him. Tempest was really surprised that he even asked her that. After all, it has been at least a few months since her last breakup with her boyfriend. And even though she wasn't really maybe ready to go out on a date or with another somebody else, or in this case, a dragon. But even knowing how handsome he is and that he is quite great personality, very kind, generous, like himself, so she agreed. So decided to go to this heartwarming festival that was going to take place by the next day. And when Twilight was told about this, she was really surprised that something this could happen. But knowing this is not the first time it happened, she was referring to Twilight, to Rarity and Spike, and she was really happy to see this could maybe lead to something. Even if not, they still have a good friendship. And then by the next day at the festival, both Tempest and Moonshadow had a great time. They enjoyed some of the games there, they even enjoyed some of the performance, and even enjoyed the hot cocoa together, just having such great time. They couldn't have even asked for a much better time together. Even at the end of the day, Moonshadow asked her if she enjoyed her date, and she smiled and said yes, that she really had. This was actually a very good time. This is the best time she had in a month. Because he was aware of her breakup before, and even though he didn't want to like ask her to be her girlfriend right away, but he didn't ask her if she maybe wanted to like go out with him again. And she just nodded and said yes. So even on Heartwarming Eve, both actually enjoyed the company there, and even afterwards, they started to be going on a few dates just to see if there was any spark or if there was any sort of romantic tension between them. And eventually, around the spring, they had actually become official couple. And amazed of their friends, they were actually stunned. They first didn't even thought maybe this could happen, but they were actually stunned and happy for both of them. And even though Rarity and Spike were at the first known couple of between two creatures like a dragon and a pony, were happy to see that Tempest had found her soulmate. Even she did said she really believed that Moonshadow Flash was her true soulmate. Even after that, even around summer that same after they had been after that heartwarming eve, Moonshadow Flash announced he is moving to Ponyville permanently. That shocked Tempest, but it was not the reason. She asked the reason if that he moved to Ponyville to just be with her. But that was not only the reason. He really wanted to live in Ponyville to be close to his friend Spike. And he really liked to stay there. And she was happy though. Even though that even though Moonshadow didn't have a place of his own, but one of us really offered to let him stay at the castle as long as he wanted to until he found his own place. And he agreed. And this relationship between Tempest and Moonshadow Flash only grew stronger for each single day. And especially after being dating for about a year. During the summer, something would happen. Because one day, Tempest actually had went to Every Forest to help Sakura to gather some herbs and other medicinal plants. Because they had also been starting formed a good friendship. And just as they were had just finished collecting the herbs that Sakura needed, they heard a distant sound. Knowing that this forest was filled with dangerous creatures like the timber wolves and among others. But as the sound was a little bit distant from them, there was not much to worry. But eventually, the sound was only getting larger, louder, and closer. Both Sakura and Tempest realized it was actually timberwolves howling. Somehow, these timberwolves had been scenting both Tempest and Sakura in a distance and fought an easy prey. So Sakura told Tempest to gather what she had and try and start running back to her hut and before that those could find it. And as he was about to do so, the timber wolf rushed out from the bushes and started running as fast after them. It first looked like both Tempest and Sakura was about to manage to get away from it. But then Sakura tripped. She fell, and the Timberwolves were approaching, and Sakura was down. And Tempest couldn't even just keep running. She couldn't just leave Sakura there. So she turned around and tried to use her horn, even despite being damaged, to use some of the sparks that she could to at least to try to defend off the Timberwolves. But in the end, she managed to only buy them time enough to Sakura to stand up and try to run away. But as Tempest was about to do the same, to turn around quickly, two other timber wolves came out from the different directions right behind her, and now she was cornered between four timber wolves. Sakura saw that from a distance and tried telling her, "Run!" But it was too late. The timber wolves started attacking Tempest. And Sakura, who's not even could do even perform any magic at all, she was defenseless. She was shocked. There was nothing else she could do. She didn't have any other weapons to defend her or anything. And she couldn't just run away to get some help because since Ponyville was a distant from the forest, and it was even if she managed to find some pony time and managed to bring them back, it would already be probably more likely to be too late for Tempest. But as by stroke of luck, as Sakura was wondering what her option was to do, she noticed up in the sky and some pony was flying, but realized it wasn't a pony, it was a dragon. It was a Moonshadow Flash. Moonshadow Flash wasn't aware what used to happening. He was just out for fly, used to flying around by himself. When he saw, or at least heard Sakura screaming from the below, he turned down, he looked down and saw Sakura, and she was waving at him. And he thought, well, he was waving back. because he thought maybe that she saw him and just wanted to say hi to him from distance. But for some reason, he could somehow see that she was very devastated, distraught of oppression, or at least appearance. She looked terrified, and something realized that to him, something was terribly wrong. And then he could hear in an instant screams, timberwolves howling, and he heard some banging, smashing, and even more howling. And then he heard the scream again, and then he realized it was Tempest. Because he knew that Tempest was actually going to spend time with Sakura to gather some herbs for her. But when he saw that Sakura was just below him, terrified look, screaming towards him, and hearing Tempest scream and Timberwolves howls, Sakura didn't need to tell him exactly what happened. Because right then he took off, right in the direction where Sakura were looked at. Because just before he took off, he saw that Sakura looked at her and looked at the direction that the sound came from. And he took off. And when he arrived, he's seeing Tempest trying to defend herself against four big timber walls. By using her horn as much as he could, try to just kick them, but they always get up and try to slash her with their claws and attack her, try to biting her. And eventually, she was down to the ground. And then the timber was about to try to make a final strike attack. But then, something did happen. Just before Tempest lost consciousness, she looked up and saw this gray blur thing quickly dive down from the sky and flying around, smashing those timberwolves into pieces. And just then, she lost consciousness. And it was in fact Moonshadow Flash who dove down from the sky at high speed and managed to smash at least three of the timberwolves into pieces. The fourth one was now standing there silent. And Moonshadow looked at him with a scared face, like with the breathing fire smoke from his nose. And the timberwolves realized this is a dragon, and it's not a good thing to do anything to harm. So rather than attacking, it took off right in the forest. And then Moonshadow looked down at Tempest. She was unconscious, severely injured. He picked her up and flew through Sakura, telling her that he's taking her to the hospital, and if she were trying to find the others of their friends, telling them what happened. And he took off. And a few hours later, Tempest was still unconscious, but Moonshadow Flash was sitting in her in her room, while the others, Twilight, Fluttershy, Rarity, Pinky, and all of the other friends were in the waiting room, terrified, along with Sakura, who told them what happened. And even Twilight was just been very close friends to Tempest, after despite what she did in the past. The doctor told them that she had lost a lot of blood and she had very serious injuries and she was in a very critical condition and they weren't sure if she didn't were going to make it. Hearing those words shocked her friends and they started crying. And especially Spike, who also got along very close to her, and even Gruber. Gruber has served as Tempest's assistant when they both served the Storm King, was equally shocked. He couldn't even believe it. He asked the doctor, telling them to do and as much they could do to save his friend. Without his friend, he had no idea what to do next. The doctor said they were going to do any much they could do, but now for the next several hours, she will be in a very critical condition And Twilight only had one request to the doctor: to keep her informed, even throughout the night, if something would happen, if she was getting worse or getting better. The doctor promised. So her friends left, included Moonshadow Flash. But before then, she told the doctor, please, keep her safe. The doctor nodded and said that he will do as best as he can. And after by the next morning, Twilight hadn't even heard anything from the doctor as much other than that she had a still critical condition, but was so far stable. By the morning, she and Moonshadow went back to hospital, and the doctor had good news. He informed them that Tempest is going to recover perfectly well, and they asked him if Tempest was still unconscious, and he said yes. And he said he didn't know exactly when she will wake up. It can be in a few hours, maybe a day. He wasn't sure, but they were allowed to see her as often as they could, but only stay for a little bit, for a brief time because they don't want to make anything rushing. But most of the time, Moonshadow stayed by the side of Tempest, holding her hoof, telling her how much he loves her, and that he was really happy to find his true soulmate. He even said, Tempest, ever since I first saw you when I came to Ponyville by last year, you were really the most beautiful mare I ever seen. Even though I did admit it, despite that Rarity was quite beautiful, but you are the most beautiful mare I ever seen. Mane red as a ruby, eyes blue as the oceans, laughter as the sweet summer breeze. Please make it through. I don't know what I would do without you. You're the most amazing pony that I ever met. You are my true love. I don't know what I would do without you. And I can see us getting married, have a family together. I really wish you can make it. Please. By telling those words to her, even though that she was unconscious, no, not knowing that if she even heard those words or not, but deep down in his heart, she heard those words. And after a couple of days, the doctor informed Twilight Tempest has woken up. Both she and Moonshadow rushed to the hospital as fast as they could, and was right. She was laying there in the hospital bed with a smile, awake, even though she was feeling a bit weak still, but at least she was awake and safe. She told him that she saw him at the forest, even though that only saw this gray, fast blur, but she knew it was him, and she was very grateful that he saved her time. But she asked about what about Sakura? Both Twilight and Moonshadow Flash said that Sakura was okay. They didn't hurt her at all. She smiled and thought and said, "That's good." And even the doctor said that she had to stay in the hospital for at least a couple more days just in case to be fully recovered. And even after when she had left the hospital, the doctor informed them that she is not allowed to do any physical training at all, just to more relaxed, just for maybe for about a month, because to make sure that she made a full recovery. And after about a month, she was fully 100% recovered, and she went back to school as a gym teacher and self-defense teacher. And despite what happened, her love for Moonshadow Flash only had grown stronger for all this long time. And she even admitted to him that she heard him talk at the hospital. He said, "Well, I kinda knew that you would hurt me that. But anyway, I'm just happy that you did. I have no idea what I would have done if I had lost you." And despite knowing that Moonshadow was so close to losing her, but she managed to pull through. And he did eventually comment that she is a very strong and stubborn pony. Then she just chuckled and said, "Well, that's like you. Hey, well, I don't can't complain of that," he said with a smile. And eventually, after about a year after this incident or this accident, Moonshadow Flash thought he was ready. So he took with Spike to the local jewelry store and bought this engagement ring, and he said, "I'm ready to ask her to marry me." "Really?" said Spike. "Are you sure you're ready?" Spike just said with a smirk, and even though Moonshine just looked at him with a big eyes like, "Yes, I'm sure, and I know she's the one for me." Spike smiled and said, "I'm just kidding with you, Moonshadow. I know she is the right one for you, and she is the lucky one to have you." He nodded and said, "Yes, she is really lucky." And he actually took with her to a restaurant about the next day. And even though she wasn't prepared for this, but he said that this was just a small dinner date that he wanted to just take around to see, have a good time. But eventually, after when they had their dinner and when they had their dessert, he then walked up to her on her knees and showed her the ring and said, "Tempest Shadow, ever since we met over almost 2 years ago by this point, I know we hadn't even been together that long, but knowing how I almost lost you about a year ago after that attacks by the Timberwolves, I could not even have imagined a life without you. So, Tempest Shadow, do you want to marry me?" It was silent. Even the other guests and the staff looked at him, both with big eyes and holding breath to waiting to see the answer. And Tempest actually said yes, and she started crying. And suddenly, as she said yes, the whole restaurant started cheering for both of them, including the staff. They were just like, "Hooray! Congratulations!" And it was a lot of cheering, though. And especially right after that, even when they went back to the castle, because their friends had already been informed by Moonshadow just before when they went left that he was going to propose to her. Even though that they kept a secret, but when they told, they were both all happy. There was something else that Tempest Shadow wasn't aware of. With help of Twilight, they managed to find her Tempest hometown and even asked her parents to come to Ponyville. Even despite this, even after she moved back, even since when Tempest moved to Ponyville, she and her parents had restarted their relationship again. They were devastated after she just ran away so long time ago. But they were at least happy that she was safe and now she had a good had rekindled her bad decisions. And they were also had been informed by Moonshadow that he was going to propose, and they were actually supporting and accepting. After hearing what he did, after saving his daughter from the Timberwolves all those about only a year earlier, they actually gave him their support. And even when Tempest saw them there, she was that really surprised. She wasn't even expecting her own parents to be there, but she was happy seeing both her parents there, smiling, crying, hugging them, and then Tempest's father said, Moonshadow's Flash, yes, welcome to the family. And from that day on, they all decided to plan the wedding for only the next few weeks. And of course, Tempest's parents will be there also. And Spike had been asked to be Moonshadow's best man, which he accepted. Rarity was asked to be Tempest's bridesmaid, which he also accepted. And of course, they decided to have the wedding in Ponyville at Sweet Apple Acres because they were having a lot of guests and even diplomats and ambassadors from other kingdoms. And it was a great wedding. And especially for Tempest, though. She was actually a bit nervous, but most of all, happy. And for about Moonshadow, he wasn't nervous as much. He was more excited and just happy to be able to get married with his true love. Even after the wedding it was over, they all had this ceremony. Applejack and her family had provided with the food, and even some with some Rarity, Big Mac, and the other Polytunes actually performed the music, along with Fluttershy and even Sweetie Belle. At the party, which Pinky had arranged, they all had a great time. Moonshadow Flash was really excited now to be married with Tempest Shadow, and even though he was just happy to be with the one he loved the most of all. But even after all this time, Tempest was even excited to have finally found a true soulmate. Even when she was when even during her time with Storm King, she never even believed she never even thought that she was gonna find her soulmate or even true love or anything, because in her mind, all she had was to find a way to restore her horn. But at the party, Twilight announced she had a gift. She explained to Tempest and Moonshadow for the past 2 years she had been doing an intense research about to find a way to restore a unicorn's broken horn. And Tempest was really surprised because she had never heard of this research. And the reason why, because Twilight explained that she didn't want to tell Moonshadow or Tempest because she didn't want to give them any false hope. But Mary didn't know that at this wedding party though, she explained she finally had found the right spell for the fangs of Celestia and Luna, and they managed to restore the horn of Tempest. And just after the horn had been restored, both her parents encouraged her to try use a spell. Even though she hadn't even used an actual spell a long time, she was nervous how this even if it's gonna work or not. Even Twilight was a little bit hesitated that maybe not this gonna work. But as though when Tempest, despite a little bit that had been a little bit under practice of magic for a while, she used a levitation spell, and it worked perfectly. She was just over beyond happy. She hugged Celestia, Luna, and Twilight over and over, thanking them while crying that this was one of the best gifts any pony can ever have given her. She was really happy. Having her ability to perform magic again. This would have been the best gift ever she had ever get from anyone. Even though she was just happy that now she can perform magic, and not only that, to have finally found her true soulmate. And by the end of the day, both Moonshadow and Tempest actually went to a tropical island for a week, which was as a gift from both Cadence and Shining Armor. And they actually really had a great time there. with swimming in the ocean, doing some sightseeing and everything. Just amazing time. And they actually decided to still live in Ponyville. And about 2 years later, both Moonshadow and Tempest announced they were expecting a baby within the next few months. And they announced it's a daughter. And all the friends, and including Tempest's parents, was so eager to know exactly what is their names gonna be. And it turns out they actually had a dragon pony hybrid. And not only that though, just 3 years later, they expecting another baby. But they later found out it was twins. Both dragon hybrid pony. And they just really felt happy. And the twins though, they were actually two boys. And they were even eager to know more about themselves. And Moonshadow, Flash, and Tempest. They could have been more happier to be with the one they loved the most. Not only these had been found a true love and having a family of their own, a daughter, twin boys, it was the best gift that Tempest could ever ask for. Well, except from her get her horn returned back to the store, but other than that, she was just happy to have found true soulmate and only to that to have a family with him. If she had never had went back to Ponyville, she would never have found her true soulmate and never had met Moonshadow. And if her friend, even if her past relationship with her ex-boyfriend didn't have the broken, if he hadn't even broken up with her, she had never hadn't even met Moonshadow at all. And even Moonshadow, he really was excited that he did meet Tempest in Ponyville during his first visit. Even despite all that, he wasn't really sure if he was at that time. He wasn't even sure if this relationship between her and him just wasn't even going beyond a friendship. But he was really happy to have realized he had feelings towards Tempest at that time. And even if Spike hadn't invited Moonshine Flash to come visit in Ponyville, he still wouldn't have met his true love. And after all that, he even had thanked Spike at the wedding that he was really happy that he invited him to visit him in Ponyville. Because when he did that, unintentionally, he was actually introducing him to his future wife without even knowing it. And Spike said that he was really happy to been happy to been doing it. Even though this was not unintentionally, but both Tempest and Moonshadow Flash were just happy that Spike did introduce them to each other, or at least to make them get to know each other better, to be friends. And even Twilight actually also said the same thing, that she was really happy that Tempest had found somebody. Even though that her friends all those years ago were was really concerned if she even gonna find a true love at all. Especially Rarity when she had even done it. And in fact, there were all those small parts in their involvement, how this new relationship started in the first place. If it wasn't for Rarity had even talked about this speed dating, or even had talked about let to see if Tempest wanted going to try that out. If she had even asked her about that part, she may have even met her ex-boyfriend, and she may not have even considered being dating at all. There were a lot of things that both Tempest and Moonshadow wasn't even aware of that could happen lead to. But still, both of them were really happy to have found not only to each other From even they were originally from the beginning just as two friends, or at least friends. But it could lead something to something like a marriage, a family life. But even despite this, the most major event that took place in both their lives when Tempest was attacked by those Timberwolves. And she was still grateful all this time afterwards that Moonshadow saved her from being attacked and even being killed by one of those Timberwolves. Even when she said that to him, and he explained, he would do anything to keep her and their children safe. Because he would have sacrificed his own life to save his beloved ones. Even it meant to sacrifice his own life to save his wife and family, if any of this would happen again. Even though that Rarity and the others were a little touched to hearing those words from Moonshadow, because they know he is honest about it. Knowing that he is a fast flyer and strong fighter, he wouldn't even hesitate to do anything to protect his beloved ones. Even knowing how much his relationship with Tempest grow from just being friends to a relationship, and which eventually led to marriage. There was so much that Tempest couldn't even had asked for. Not only not having Moonshadow by her side, but also have her friends there. Because her friends, they really meant so much to her. Because if Twilight had even offered her to stay in Ponyville all those years ago, she don't believe she would have even met Moonshadow at all at that time. And not only that, Tempest Shadow herself was really happy that she managed to at least meet Moonshadow Flash all those years ago. But even despite that, but even as during, especially during the wedding, when Twilight, Luna, and Celestia gave her the most amazing gift ever by restoring her horn after so long of not being able to be used magic. It was the most amazing gift that any pony had ever given her. And especially when she was in the service of Storm King, believing his lies that he would use the alchemical magic together to help her to restore her horn, without knowing his deceit that he would never go to keep his promise. But he actually had moved on and had even given up hope to find a way to restore her horn. Even she wasn't sure if it was possible, but she can actually understand the reason why Twilight never told anyone, especially her, about her intense research to find a way to restore a unicorn horn after such a long time. But even though she wasn't even sure, even when the horn had been restored, she wasn't even sure if she could still perform magic. Because not knowing if this horn was still restored, she wasn't even sure if the magic itself was being able to use. But she was still grateful towards Rarity, Applejack, and other friends, especially Twilight, who had been there for her all this time, despite when they had offered her to be a friend. And but even when she uptaken her the mission to traveling to all those kingdoms the Storm King had been to, telling them that he was gone and would never return. After complete that journey, that mission, she will on to take another one, which will eventually lead to meeting her true soulmate, Moonshadow Flash. Even though that after all this time, especially when their children was young, both Tempest and Moonshadow Flash traveled often to Dragonlands so that their children could experience their dragon heritage from the other dragons. And in fact, both Tempest and Moonshadow Flash had encouraged their children to embrace both sides of the ancestry, their heritage, as a pony and as a dragon. And they both knew their children would grow up strong and brave. And even if that was not the truth, but Tempest knew her children will grow up strong and brave, like their father himself. But even after all this, how much else do Tempest love Moonshadow? Her love for him goes beyond anything else. And this is how Moonshadow, Flash, and Tempest Shadow found a true love, got a family together. The end.